Hi everyone, so today we are going to be learning how to paint with tea and coffee. Okay, so you will need quite a few things for this. This is a really good way of painting at home if you don't have any paints. It's also a really great way of making a sepia effect. Sepia is different levels of brown within a picture. Instead of it having any black or white or any colour, it uses strictly browns. So how a lot of old photos look is by using sepia. Okay, so for this you're going to need quite a few things. You're going to need quite a lot of mugs. So I've used, these are little 100ml mugs, and I've used these bigger ones here. These are 200ml mugs. I've got a little plastic one that's just got water in to wash my paintbrush in. I've got a jug of hot water. Now I don't want you to use boiling water. Do not use boiling water. The reason for this is, if you use boiling water and it falls or you get it on your finger or anything like that, it will scald you, it will burn and it will hurt. Okay, so I want you to use hot water just from the tap, something that's not going to burn you, but will still do the job. Okay, now you'll also need a paintbrush. Okay, if you don't have a paintbrush, my suggestion is try using maybe some sticks or anything you can find around the house and just try that and see if it works. But I'm going to use a paintbrush. Okay, so first things first, what I've done here is I've put about 50ml of water into this one with a tea bag. In this one, I'm trying to make a bit of a lighter shade, so I'm going to need more water. So I've put 100ml of water in this one with the tea bag. And these, I've got 3 levels of coffee. I've used pod coffees because that's what I have at home. You might have instant coffee, which will work really well for this actually. So I've put quite a lot of coffee in this one with no extra water. If you're using instant coffee, you'll always have to put a little bit of water in. So for this one, I'd probably say like a teaspoon of instant coffee with about 25ml of hot water. Hot, not boiling. For this second one, I would put 1 teaspoon of instant coffee in with 50ml of warm water. Now, if you're using pod coffee like I am, I've poured in about up to 25ml, so about up to here on my mug, you can see that, into each one with using a pod, and then I've added extra water to weaken it. Okay, so for this one, I did it up to there with about 25ml of coffee, and then I added an extra 25ml with just warm water. Okay, and finally this one, again, either 1 teaspoon or 25ml of pod coffee with a full 75ml of warm water. Okay, so I'm going to show you what the different colours look like. I will suggest that for this you start with just a blank piece of paper. Don't start straight onto your work. Okay, if you start straight onto your work and it's not what you want it to be, or you've not used enough coffee, or something's gone wrong, there's no going back. You've done it. Okay, whereas if you start on a blank piece of paper, it's good test work, shows that you're trying things out and you're not afraid to try things. But it also means you're being careful and being precise about your actual final piece and how you want it to look. Okay, so I'm going to start with my weak coffee, which is this one, which is the, I've forgotten how much water I used with it now, but I said it at the beginning of the video. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I've left my tea bags in, okay, because the longer you leave the tea bags in, the better the colour. Okay, so you can see here it's got like a nice goldeny colour. It's quite light. Tea will be lighter than coffee, that's to be expected, but tea will also be quite a goldeny colour, where coffee will be more of a dark brown chocolatey kind of colour. Okay, so that's quite light. Here we have the other tea. This one's even lighter than the first one. This is why I only did 2 shades with the tea, because the tea is quite light anyway, and to get the different shades, to get it darker, you really have to wait for it to dry and then layer up and keep adding layers. Okay, you might remember when we did mark making that if you're doing pen, pencil, paint, anything you're doing, the more you go over something, the darker it will get. The difference with paint and tea and coffee and any kind of wet medium is that you have to wait for it to dry before you add another layer. Don't keep going over it and over it with more tea or paint or any wet medium, because what's going to happen is that the fibres in the paper are going to start coming away, okay, which is when you get that like bobbledy effect just before the paper starts to tear. And what that is the little fibres are getting wet and they're coming away from the paper the more you brush it, okay. So leave it to dry before you add another layer. Okay, so now I'm going to use the weakest coffee. So this one's got the most amount of water in. Okay. Now I've not washed my brush yet. And I want to point out that the reason I've not washed my brush yet is because I've gone from tea to coffee. And tea is lighter than coffee. Okay, but if I go from coffee to tea, I'm going to make sure to wash my brush. Because I don't want the coffee getting in the tea. Because the coffee getting in the tea is going to make the tea too dark. But the tea getting into the coffee is not going to make a difference. Okay. So this is the weakest coffee, which is pretty much not even there. I might have even put a bit too much water in there. So make sure not to add too much water, because that's obviously what I have done here. I mean, you can still see some colour, I suppose. It's quite a nice light shade, but you're not really getting much colour from that. Okay, so now I'm going to go for the medium. This should be a little bit darker. I'd also like to point out that I've not added milk to any of my drinks. Well, not drinks because I'm not going to drink them, but to any of my cups of tea or coffee. And the reason for that is because if you add milk, it's just going to change the colour, but also when it dries on your paper, it could smell quite sour and gross. So I didn't want to use milk. So that was the medium one. It's still quite light, but it's getting there. And this finally is the darkest one. This should be really nice and dark. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, that's nice and dark. Brilliant. Okay, so what I've learned just from doing this small little section is that in these two here, these two coffees, I have put too much water. Okay, so you really only need a real small amount of water. So my suggestion was, if you get your coffee, just add like a tiny little bit of water, give it a try, add a tiny little bit more, give it another try, you know, until you get that colour that you want, because I've clearly added too much water and now it's almost invisible. But if you do want that colour, then great. Okay, so I'm going to wash my paintbrush because I'm going to go from coffee to tea. And I'm going to go back to my tea because I want to add another layer to this tea now that it's nice and dry. Okay, so it does dry quickly, you know. When I'm saying you've got to leave it to dry, I don't mean like leave it overnight. Just, you know, just if you can touch it and it feels dry, that's perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my stronger tea. I'm going to really get in there. Okay, good. Right, and then I'm going to go back over the top of it. Now you can see now that I've gone over the top of it, it's not only getting darker, but it's getting a lot more golden, okay? If we look at this brown here, it's much darker, it's much more grainy, whereas this is much much lighter, but still darker than the original tea that we'd done, okay? So that's just a few different layers and a few different ways of doing it. If you find other ways, test it out on a piece of paper first. If you think, man, that works really well, then do that. Fantastic. Tell me how you did it so I can do it too. Make sure that you test it first. Make sure that you're happy with the colours and things that you've created before you start putting it on your final piece. You know, we've given you a long time to do your work, and we do that because we want it to be the best of your ability. And this is just one of the ways that you can do it. Okay. So that's all for my tea and coffee demo. If you want to do tea and coffee, you can. If you want to do colour, you can. If you want to do a mix of both, that is also okay. I'd love to see you experiment, try different things. You know, we've left this quite open. You can do it on the computer, you can do it by hand. You know, we've left this open because we want to see you really get creative. Try different things, you know, go crazy with it, okay? Right then, can't wait to see what you show up with, and thank you for watching my video.